Hello, and thank you for joining today's webinar. We will be starting in 2 minutes. Hello, and thank you for joining today's webinar. We are ready to begin. Today's webinar is eligible for 1 contact hour. Sigma Theta Tau International Honor Society of Nursing is accredited as a provider of continuing nursing education by the American Nurses Credentialing Center's Commission on Accreditation. The speakers and planning committee members have disclosed no conflicts of interest. To receive contact hours for this CNE session, participants are required to attend the webinar and complete the evaluation form, which will be emailed to all attendees approximately 2 days after the webinar. This webinar is being recorded and will be available via the Sigma repository within a few business days of recording. Following the presentation, we will have a question and answer session. You'll see on your GoToWebinar control panel that you can send a message through the questions feature. This is where you can type in any question you'd like to pose to the presenters. Be sure to hit send so the message makes it to us. To test out this feature, please submit the state or country you are from. On behalf of Sigma, we would like to thank our speakers for sharing their expertise with us today. Our speakers are Dr. Carol Lisk and Marie-Louise Lauking. Dr. Carol Lisk is an award-winning leader in an online academic environment, a longtime community advocate and philanthropist. Carol's service includes board membership on governmental committee and nonprofit organizations at the local and international levels. Carol serves in elected and appointed international positions for Sigma and is currently a member of the International Board of Directors as Regional Chapter Coordinating Committee Chair. Marie-Louise Lauking is the current Sigma European Regional Coordinator, elected for a 2nd term. In serving this region in this position, Lauking uses virtual technology to connect with all the European chapters, committees, research collaborations, members and lecturers' activities given at the regional level. Lauking has used this forum to connect Sigma European members and chapters together with a European Sigma identity. Our first panel question is for Carol. Carol, our organization is eager to try a virtual event. However, not all are on board with this. How can we promote a virtual event to those that are on board? And what are the advantages of making our event virtual?
Oh, thank you for that question. You know, it's interesting. Nurses have never been afraid to try anything, but we do like to be prepared and have our expertise right up front so we know what we're doing. And I think a lot of the challenges is sometimes it's a new journey. We're not that familiar with it. So first looking at virtual platforms as a way of reaching out to those people who can't connect, whether it's because of geographic issues, and of course now with COVID, we've got the social isolation. So virtual programming allows us an opportunity to connect with some members that ordinarily may not be able to attend a ground-based or live event. So as far as getting people on board, you've just got to try it. It's not an exact science, and there is an area of developing mastery. So to some extent, I would say it's not unlike going from a novice nurse to an expert. We also start as a novice technologically proficient Sigma member to an expert, and that's a journey. We were just speaking a little earlier before we opened the program, and we would be kidding ourselves if we didn't say we didn't get nervous before any event, because we want it to be the best it can be, and we as nurses strive for excellence. So I would start by saying, number one, let's try it. We might be connecting with people who ordinarily wouldn't be able to connect with us. Number two, let's learn through this process. So we still have to practice and make sure that we're providing the best program possible. But we also know afterwards that we might need to look back and say, how would we do things a little differently? And thirdly, it's just trying something new. There is an energy that comes from innovation and sometimes a little bit of newness. It shakes things up a bit, and it allows us to, again, show that we're willing to stretch in order to reach out to our members and provide benefits to all of the chapter members.
Marie-Louise, planning a virtual event can be overwhelming. How do you start this process? Where do I begin?
Well, I think the first thing is to check, whether within your chapter or your region there's an audience, whether there's an appetite for a virtual event, whether people are willing to embrace new technology, because maybe not every member is on the same page. I think also as well, when you're looking at your audience, you should also look at the people that you might need to help you to establish this virtual platform. So I would look at more experienced members within chapters, maybe to start off with people that are sort of very familiar with using social media, because I think it has to be a comfortable transition as well as an exciting one, as a new initiative, but people have to feel as if they know what they're doing when they start, because it's a massive undertaking in regards to your volunteering hours. So, and also I would say time to plan, and yeah, that's also very important, not to start a month beforehand, but to actually take quite a lead, and gives everybody, I suppose, that feeling of there will be adequate preparation, and that you bring everybody with you together on that journey, and therefore looking at issues along the way helps members to embrace, the speed maybe that you might wish to go at when you have established that there is an audience, that there are people who wish to participate and engage. So I would say baby steps, and make sure that there is an audience, otherwise you're doing the work just maybe for yourself, which is not very clever. But and then after that, building a team, because together everybody achieves more, and there is no I, obviously, in the word team. So those are the two things that I would suggest from my experiences as a past president and as a regional coordinator at the moment, is a little bit of groundwork before you actually take on a virtual event. Yes. So.
Carol, what questions should you ask when selecting a platform? What should we look for when we're using a virtual platform?
Platform selection is about as personal as it is choosing a laptop in many respects. What works best for you, but it's also a cost factor. So one of the things we've learned recently is that, especially now with the social distancing internationally, globally, that several of the platforms work better depending on the country you're in, depending on the type of program that you want to host. Do you want to identify who's registering in advance and who actually attends? So when you're looking at platforms, first start out by looking at the various platforms. Several of them that I can think of offhand would be like GoToWebinar, GoToMeeting, Cisco WebEx. Many of us work in an organization where they have a meeting platform that they might allow us to use, and then you're able to work through their network and security system. Also, Zoom has been used. What we have found is that there are advantages and disadvantages, if you will, or some pitfalls to some of those platforms. So start by looking at cost. And cost is often driven by the options that you need, as well as the number of attendees that you want to participate. And many of these platforms will allow you to increase the licensing, if you will, for one event. So let's say, for instance, you generally have about 30 to 50 members attend, maybe even less. You can go with a smaller licensing fee, but you're going to host an event such as what Marie does throughout Europe, where you may have 100+ people attending, such as today. In those instances, you can upgrade the license for just that one event. So you want to check to see, are those options available? What is the pricing? The other thing that we've heard from chapters, but we can't afford it. Some of these platforms can be expensive when you purchase a private license. And that's when we've recommended collaboration, whether you're working with another chapter in your region. And what's interesting is some of the chapters that are larger may have more funding, but they don't have the same human capital. And maybe some of the smaller chapters have very enthusiastic members, but they don't have the funding. So the region coordinators are a perfect individual to talk to say, who could we collaborate with? And in fact, some of those chapters may already have a platform purchased. And then the final piece is working with a chapter that might be able to offer some continuing ed units. They may already within their university do that. So when you're doing those collaborations, there may be some serendipitous benefits as well, besides just using and sharing a platform.
I'd just like to add something there, that as a regional coordinator for Europe, that is something that when I, in my first term, in order to obviously collaborate with all the chapters and all the committees, I did have a subscription to a virtual platform. And as we went along, I also offered that to all the chapters, you know, give me the times when you want to meet for your board or research. And we made a matrix and popped them all in so that I was able to offer, and we didn't have clashing in the agendas. You know, so that was something that I think the regional coordinator is very well placed to do that pivotal role if possible.
And that's a great idea. I love that idea.
Marie-Louise, how do you determine when to host the event? What time of day, what time of year?
Well, when I started at the regional level, I held a small straw poll at one of our regional committee meetings, which I have to say I'm very lucky because I get literally as good as 100% attendance, which is amazing still. And I just ask the chapter leaders, you know, how is the faculty curriculum in your university? Can you say something about your particular country? Because obviously students in various countries do exams at slightly different times. I know England will be very busy towards the end of May. I know that Italy may be in March. So that information comes back. And then I also look at all the committees that we have in Europe. We have 7. And then you get an idea of roughly what the time is during the day. So that's then I have suggestions, and then I put them out for tender to the presidents of the chapters and ask them, look, is this what you think when it comes to the annual plan? And do you think, is this the right time during the day? Because bearing in mind, some people like to have their time within the faculty time, and some like to do it when they get home in the evening. So this was a bit of, you know, matching it all up together. But I think it was very important to do it. Some people may have thought at the time, you know, Marie-Louise is probably taking this a little bit too seriously, but a little prep work at the beginning has meant that, as I said earlier, that our attendance, you know, when it comes to the regional committee meeting, it's amazing, and it still is after I'm now in the second term. And also the committees, we're quite heavily with committees, as we have obviously 2 research committees as well. But if you pick it right or pitch it right, then the sustainability also of that committee is very apparent. You know, so I would say do a small straw poll. If you've been a president of a chapter, you'll probably also have an idea, an inkling, but just sound your chapter leaders out. You can do it officially, you can do it unofficially, but that is very important because it's part of the, how can I put it to you, the foundation really of moving forward. If your foundation isn't good, or it's a little bit fragile or whatever, then you will see cracks appearing further down the line, which is not what you want to see. So prep,
yes.
Yeah, and polling.
And I would like to add, I loved your phrase, pick and pitch. That's you know, I love those mnemonics. But I think the thing that's interesting is it also depends on as she mentioned, who the attendees are. And I am currently president of a chapter that goes spans 4 time zones, our members, and then also previously as past president of Phi Gamma, that was international, global. And so sometimes we just have to select the time that reaches not just the most people, but maybe the people that you most want to reach, which is interesting. So if some chapters like Phi Gamma have selected a day and time every 3 months that they're going to host their induction. It was the time that they could capture most everybody between the hours of 6 a.m. and midnight, depending on all the time zones. We've done ours 5 a.m. Pacific, excuse me, 5 p.m. Pacific to 8 p.m. Eastern. So it just depends on who that audience is. And I love what you've done in terms of polling. Find out when they want to meet, because you might be surprised. Some people may prefer to meet a little later than during the workday. So, you know, find out what they want.
How can we consider the environment for our attendees? Do we need to consider if they're watching at home or in the office?
Yes, you know, it's interesting, and also the environment of those of us presenting. I love seeing the home environment. I think it brings an intimacy to this experience, but there are times, let's say for instance, a chapter chartering, where it's going to be memorialized for the history of that chapter. You might want it to be in a more formal background setting or use one of the Sigma images. So it really depends on what's going to happen with that recording, or if you're going to record it, number one, and then what you're going to do with that recording in terms of archiving. The other thing is it does take some practice to look at, like even today, prior to this presentation, I went on camera early to check and see, you know, is there a light bulb that's on above my head, or what kind of shading do we have? And it was interesting. You'll notice that I kind of positioned myself like this because when I was actually sitting in the center of my desk, it looked like I had a key growing out of my head. So you just want to check some of those little things. We were speaking a little earlier about pets in your home. There is a time sometimes when you're having a board meeting or a small committee meeting where it might be fun to introduce everybody's pets, because they will come into the room, or you'll hear a bark, or you'll see a cat jump on a desk. So you don't need to make it so perfect if it's a much more informal meeting versus a formal presentation such as this. The other thing is practice. There really is tremendous value in practicing with your presenters. Help them feel a little more comfortable coming on and off camera. Eye contact. Are you making eye contact with the pictures of the people, or are you looking at your camera so that your eye contact is with those attendants? And it's going to take time. So the first time through, I've always recommended presenters to view the recording and self-critique, provide themselves a little debrief on how they might want to do something a little differently next time.
That brings me to my next question. What else do we need to do in order to prepare for our presentations during the virtual event?
Shall I take that one? I just want to mention in Europe, about 6 years back, we decided to do a PhD virtual Connect, and that obviously has grown now to roughly about a 3-hour mini conference on an afternoon. I think our next one's on the 18th of November. Again, November was a very good time when we polled for PhD students in Europe, because not a lot of defending the thesis at that stage. So you were, approaching PhD students who are very, very busy at a slightly less busier time. So that was a success on choosing, the month in the year. But we've done actually a lot of preparation work with those attendees in regards to presentation skills, in regards to when we actually do attend on the day, we open up about an hour beforehand, and we bring all the presenters in and we give them a chance to share their screens, to go through their slides if there's, because in Europe, not everybody's English is their first language, so some attendees do have a little bit of And then we managed to sort of, familiarize people, with the group that's there to help them, the moderators and the host. And I do feel that that we have now obviously got a sort of a prep book up, which hopefully people who are joining our committee will be able to read that and get a sense of what we're trying, to do with this particular virtual presentation. What I'm trying to, I think, is that preparation work is what you have to do, even with your committee members who are helping you, as to the attendees, and also to the people who may not be presenting within that, but actually are attending to see, the presentations, that you don't, forget. So we do actually, 10 minutes before the conference starts, we do welcome also them in as well as a separate entity. And we have found in the evaluation that that has been very positive, that we recognise all the groups that are attending. It helps it then to make it a much more valuable experience for everybody. Carol.
Yes, no, I agree. And you've become masterful in pulling that off. I agree.
Carol, do we need to present differently at a virtual event? Do our presentation styles need to change in any way? And if so, how?
I would say yes and no. First of all, it is, especially if you're recording. If you're attending, a group and it's more informal, as I was saying, when you talk about pets and doing some of those fun things, it can be a little more laid back. You don't have to worry so much about your hair or your makeup or your backgrounds. But overall, there is a bit of a difference, and it's because it's being viewed a little differently. The other thing, when you're developing a program such as this, we don't know. Those of you attending don't know me. You don't know Marie, and so there is an assessment that you're making of our background, our experience, or what we're talking about. So you want to be sure that you've got it crafted in a way that your credibility and your authenticity is coming through. And there is a bit of an art to that. But I really believe that if you're just genuine and if you feel like you're answering and providing a presentation in a very authentic way, that's going to come across on camera. It's kind of interesting. The other piece to that is I remember when I first started these presentations, boy, and this has been Phi Gamma, probably at least 6 to 8 years ago when I first started doing more virtual global presentations. I always worried about forgiveness. When you're on stage and there's a little blooper with a technology piece, or if you happen to cough and need a sip of water, the audience sits there and waits. And when you're in airtime like this, a 5 or 10 second pause seems like an eternity. But I have found that the participants and the attendees, there's a lot of forgiveness there. They understand. And again, because we're nurses very often and we're all in this together. The other thing that I think is important is scripting. You want to have scripting, but you don't want to sound scripted. And so, after a period of time when you do a number of inductions, you almost know what you need to say by heart. So you can speak a little more authentically looking at the camera. But there are times when you may need to look down and use notes, like if you're reading somebody's bio. So just know that you want to still be very natural in your movements, but try as much as possible to look up. So if you have multiple screens or a mobile device, you can put your script to the left, so at least your head is up and you're reading, but you don't feel like you're always looking down. So if you do a small 2-minute practice and see how you would look on camera, then you can just review how you feel you should change your body movement. Again, because it's up close and personal. It's far different than being on a stage, on the other side of the room.
Marie-Louise, should we set up a code of practice for our virtual events?
Yes, I think we should. In the light of COVID and hacking, this I think is a very important question. I also think that when you have a committee that does the virtual events, and maybe you have new members, it is also very important, to have some documentation that you can pass out, to your committee members, so that they can become, knowledgeable within a shorter amount of time. I also think it is very important that everybody knows on a virtual meeting, if something like a pitfall happens, what they're supposed to do. And I think also tasks are very important, to maybe you might have a host who's hosting, but you should, I think, in these days have maybe a moderator, somebody who is just looking after the technical ability, who is probably, looking after maybe the waiting room, checking the people that are coming in against maybe your registration list, maybe helping you lock the meeting at some stage, and I think if everybody who is in the committee who is helping, obviously, to perform this, has their roles and they're defined, especially if something does happen and you are hacked, that people know what to do and how to carry on. If that means turning your screens off for could be 1 to 2 minutes, and being able to communicate, if that is still possible, to your attendees, that you have another plan in place, or not, and be quite candid. Sorry, we don't. We just have to go offline. So I think, yes, in this day and age, I think, unfortunately, a script is definitely a prerequisite. I just think it's challenging, but I think we're having to lift our game on that respect. And I think it doesn't matter what platform I think you go for. I've heard, there are a number of incidences world round at the moment, and so there's that. I think a script also makes people in the committee think, of all the things that need to be included. And I think it also brings up a good discussion and a sense of camaraderie. So, yeah, I think it's important.
Great. And I might add, I loved your recommendation about a moderator. We always had 2 people set up as hosts in case one person's technology failed or was getting a bandwidth loss. Then you had somebody that was right there to continue. The other thing, I love the idea of the moderator, because very often you will have chat, especially when you're in a smaller committee environment. But sometimes people get a little off with their, they'll start talking about the weather or their family when you're trying to accomplish some an initiative, discuss something, and really make sure that your committee is achieving its outcomes. So in those instances, you can set up some parameters where you have a little bit of a water cooler discussion, if you will, for prior to the meeting. Once the meeting starts, set up guidelines that the chat should be focused on the discussion, and remind everybody that they should mute unless they're going to unmute to speak. So it takes a little bit of a reminder before every event, and most people very much appreciate that, especially video. Sometimes they won't realize that when they log in, they're on video and they aren't camera ready. So you're actually offering them a service and a kindness so that they don't get embarrassed that maybe they're on camera and they didn't realize it.
Plus, I just wanted to add, I think that a code of practice also you can archive, in your either your chapter archive or with the region in our regional archive, which makes that if you're having new volunteers, that you have something, that they can actually grasp, can look at. So maybe you have people that are not experienced, but with a code of practice that gives some form of security, makes people feel also a little bit reassured as to, if things were to go whatever way, how they would, react. And also the responsibility, it makes it very clear who's responsible for what. Which I think is also very important, because if you do have an incident which can be, in any way a pitfall, it's a bit sort of, everybody's flight or fight reaction comes out, and therefore, if you know beforehand how to react and who's going to, I think it also makes it look to attendees and obviously to the evaluation later. I think it helps the support that you obviously will be offering at a later stage if needed. But I think it's,
Yes, I agree.
Carol, if I'm not comfortable with technology, who can I turn to for help?
Well, you're looking at her. No. Interestingly, technology is such a broad topic, but the fact is that technology also is individual parts and different individual types. So we're speaking about virtual programming, and you always want to have somebody that, again, can back you up and give yourself time to practice. Many of us are not digital natives, if you will. We didn't grow up in this environment. But what's interesting is how people are embracing it and understanding that the options in virtual platforms are becoming far more intuitive. And as a host, you have options that you can do a little differently than the presenter options. So who do you turn to for help? First of all, Sigma has tremendous resources. And I know for a fact, you've heard from me quite often, but no, seriously, you don't have to be a technological expert to understand the importance of using technology. That's the first step, that you are open to creative, innovative uses of technology, but start one step at a time. Don't jump in and think, I'm going to do all of this. I'm going to do a virtual platform. We're going to put it on Facebook Live. We're going to Twitter it. We're going to tweet it out through Twitter. Oh, and then we're going to do Instagram. So start and try one at a time and master it. The other thing is I've recommended practicing among your chapter members or a few chapter leaders. If you're not sure about how to use Twitter or how to retweet something, or if you're not comfortable with Facebook Live, do a little practice with each other so that you can develop a little comfort and mastery before you start releasing this information to your chapter, or like in Marie's case, through the region, or internationally. And then finally, we have not only resources such as this, our videos. If you were to reach out to Sigma staff and say, would somebody be available to help me in our first event? Or chapter presidents like myself currently who have done it. And, I would be more than delighted. And there's several chapters now that have done virtual events. We would be happy to sit in on your first event and offer some support and advice. I mean, that's what we're there for. We're there for you. We're Sigma strong. And we can do this. And when have nurses been adverse to technology? When you look at the equipment that we deal with in the hospital setting or in our nursing experience through education, I think we just need to look at it as another piece of equipment that provides community health. And when we look at it like that, it becomes something that we realize is a very valuable tool.
I must add something. I mean, I'm a critical care nurse practitioner, so obviously technology shouldn't be a problem. I mean, I can make a ventilator whistle, and a dialysis machine still after, leaving the profession some years ago, I can still, but come to, technology, social media, oh, that's a little bit different. Oh, yes. So what I've done is I've looked in the region for people that, are very comfortable with social media and computer, and got people together. And it might only be 2 people, but, and get them together, and then it grows and it grows. And then you do your first event, and when it's a success, it sort of grows. So I would say, if you're at the beginning, baby steps, small things, and you'll be surprised, and if they don't work out, you tweak it and then, carry on, because again, we're Sigma nurses, and we are obviously always trying out things, and it doesn't always have to go 100%, I'm not talking about failure now, but embrace, that, we're volunteering, we're serving, and this is extra to our daily jobs. So, I think baby steps.
Yes. And, to your point, we need to forgive ourselves as well. Yeah. And we understand that we're not perfect beings, and that if we're trying something new as a volunteer for Sigma, it's going to be great, and that every opportunity gives us a pause to look at it and see how we can change things and make things better. Again, that's what we do as nurses. So it's really nothing different. We're just applying it to this technological experience.
Going along with our technology discussion, what if technology doesn't work during the event? What problems might we encounter, and what are possible solutions?
Oh, wow. Oh, go ahead, Marie.
Well, I would say that before you would obviously find out on the particular provider that you're using, all the scenarios. I know there's quite a lot online, even within the packages that, you might have. I would seriously read it, really through. And if I didn't understand that, I would try and find a Sigma member, that would be able to explain it to me. I know Paulo Costo from the Portuguese chapter, who is a PhD student, is an absolute whiz, so he's my go-to at the moment for our conference shortly in May, because he's able to explain quite, what's the word, I think complicated, more simply. So I would say preparation, I know you can't prepare for everything, but I think you should obviously, with the people who are hosting with you, have a backup plan, and don't think it won't happen to you, because at times it can, and that's not a problem. But to have that plan in place, and to have the person who's going to be the moderator be able to call, and say, right, this is going whatever way, we put the plan into place. And that might be putting the switch off, or it might be putting the screen blank if you're able. But I think that all scenarios should be discussed within your group that are helping you, not just obviously getting your presenters in and all these things that you're having to do, but I think also scenarios that you might encounter. I think you have to have some form of a commitment in the group, that if this happens, who's going to take the lead? Sort of delegate the jobs, I think, at the time of going virtual. And the bigger, obviously, a virtual presentation is, for example, a conference, I think that you might have to have a standalone committee. That if you have a conference with a conference app as well, that you might have to have, I won't call it policing, but you'll have to have moderators all in the virtual rooms that obviously can talk to each other as well at certain times, because you just, as I say, I think you can never gather anything or capture everything, but you should have an intention to have a policy and have a form of it's not policing I'm looking for the word now, but
it really is a facilitation process. You're right. Just to make sure that we try to identify those pitfalls. I've had a couple of experiences, and it's interesting. First of all, there is a bit of a theatric component to this, in that if something goes wrong, like if that picture fell off the wall behind my head, I would act like nothing ever happened, right? But sometimes you might, if there's a sound and it startles you. So again, try to mitigate those types of possible unexpected events. I had two situations. One, when I was president of Phi Gamma, I was conducting the induction. I'll never forget that when I was outside of my home office. I was working in a different location, and right in the middle of the event, all of my technology, everything shut down, went black. And what was really very exceptional about it is the president-elect at the time was facilitating, and we always had multiple people with the script. So everybody knew both the PowerPoint, if you were using slides, and the script. And she just picked right up and went on. Now, I'm mortified. I'm off location. Everything's black. I had no communication, so I'm texting. And I always say that it would be very valuable to have your mobile device. So this way you can text offline if something's going on, so you can get an answer without talking through it on the presentation itself. And interestingly, members were sending thank yous. This was a wonderful presentation. It was excellent. We didn't miss a beat. They didn't know that I was dying. The other situation that occurred fairly recently was I was conducting an induction, and I'm going through the script and talking, and in this beautiful presentation, advancing my slides, and we got a text message from the facilitator that said, your slides aren't advancing. The slide is still showing about 4 slides back. So in that situation, what I said to them, I just received word that my slides aren't advancing. I'm going to pause for a moment, let me refresh, and I'll be right back with you. So sometimes you have to notify the audience that you have to make a little adjustment. So you'll become more comfortable with it as long as you don't look at it as self-judgment. You know, it's like, well, it happens, let's fix it.
Mm.
Carol, how can we engage attendees virtually?
You know, and one of the conversations is camera. Do we want people on camera? I love camera, but usually that's going to work most effectively when you're looking at about 20 people or less. And again, it just depends. So if you're going to be doing a presentation, such as some of the wonderful activities they're having in the Europe region, where you've got PhD, doctoral students doing a presentation, you do have to do a run through, just like you would a rehearsal, where they know when they click on their camera and click off their camera. The other thing that happens with cameras is that every now and then, depending on bandwidth, it might impact audio. So you do want to do a little bit of a practice in advance to see, will this particular program and this particular platform allow us to do camera without it impacting audio, or you'll get breaking up or it'll freeze up. And how do we else engage members? A lot of it is the pre or the advanced marketing. You know, we need to remind them why this is a valuable event to attend, that it's relevant to their practice. And there are two ways during the event you could have one person just monitoring the chat and responding to questions about the topic. And then don't forget your website or the circle. Say to them, following this presentation, we're going to conduct a discussion on the circle to further this conversation. And the presenter or a selected one or two members of your chapter will lead the discussion. And sometimes you have to prompt people. You have to have certain people submit, so that people don't want to be the first one out on the dance floor, right? They often don't want to be the first person to post something. So if you have a few people post, they don't feel like they're breaking, you know, they're the groundbreaker. They want to be sure that they're just stepping in very slowly on the periphery of the dance floor.
How do you make the event special for attendees?
Well, I'll maybe have an answer to that. What we do is we welcome everybody in, as I say, before the session starts. And we have different sort of areas, you know, for either the presenters, or attendees. And we also introduce the moderators, the host, and we have at times a number of other, we call them also moderators, but they help to facilitate the sessions if we have abstracts, you know, that we popped into topic areas. So we have sort of maybe a familiar platformizing, and I'm talking mostly about the PhD Virtual Connect at the moment, so that we make everybody sort of comfortable that, you know, this is going to be a fantastic conference and we're going to do it together. And but I must admit, when it comes to the regional meetings that we have, I think the thing is starting on time, finishing on time, and having a very good agenda and keeping to it. Obviously, allowing people to you know, give their opinions throughout. I myself try after agenda points just to clarify the actions, make it very clear what has been decided, or is there any further action. So those are in those virtual committee meetings. At conferences, when I'm talking our 1 to 2 day virtual events, I think at the moment the virtual breakout rooms, I think, are very important, you know, to making people feel special, in the fact that we will be providing, I wouldn't call them moderators, but there'll be a number of us in these rooms, I don't know, milling around virtually, I don't know how, but obviously to, you know, make sure that everybody's included. It has to be inclusive. I think more so with virtual programming, because you want people to have that feeling that it was obviously educational or it was very interesting, but you want them to feel that it was worth their while logging on, even though they might not have to travel. They can do it from their office or their whatever, but you also have to make it, feel that they are, very important to your program. It's not just your presenters, it's not just the people who are working behind the screens, but everybody on a virtual presentation is special, because that's what makes a virtual presentation. People want to come back to visit you again, is when they have that feeling that you make them obviously feel that they were integral into your virtual event. So that's my take.
Well, and Marie, honestly, nobody does it better than Marie-Louise when you're looking throughout an entire European region. And I think the other piece is that meaning. What's meaningful? And you've touched on that. What brought meaning of that program to that individual? So if it's an induction, when you think of students, meaning is my family was able to enjoy this with me. And that's where virtual platforming is phenomenal, virtual programming. Others can join, grandparents who might be homebound, irrespective of COVID, or other people in the world that you would love to be there, but they may live out of the area. The other piece of that, as you mentioned, is that it's meaningful in terms of it's relevant to them, and that you've made a point of making this presentation something that they can walk away with, something that is meaningful, changed their practice, possibly changed their mindset, but that connectedness. The other piece to that is making it special by thanking them at the end of the presentation. If it's a small enough, well, it doesn't matter the size of the group. You can send a thank you for joining us email. Or if there were people that had questions in chat, I know that I've often reached out to them personally and said, I know that we responded to this in the program, but did you have any further questions? And it's like, oh my gosh. The other thing, this is a perfect example of a pitfall that turned into a pearl. I was conducting an induction, and there was one name omitted, and then on another instance there was a name that was misspelled. Well, you can't. What I've said now subsequently is there anybody that would like that somebody who's in attendance whose name inadvertently was left off, and then I give them a special moment where they actually come and I unmute them so they can say hi to everybody, and then I will correct the PowerPoint presentation, and even though I can't change the recording, I'll send them the corrected slides so that they can include that in their e-portfolio. So it kind of leads into the next thing we wanted to cover was, what do we do after the event? How do we make sure that after the event we look at it? And it's all about wrapping up in that debrief. Double check your questions, make sure everybody was answered. And also, nurses don't have a problem critiquing. We know how to assess and say, did this work or didn't that work? What I do is I reach out to all my chapter leaders, the officers and committee chair, and I used to say, how did it go? And everybody was so sweet. Oh, it was wonderful. It was wonderful. You did a great job. That's not what I wanted to know. So now I ask, what should we change for next time? I really want some specifics, whether it's something as, the environment, lighting, but by and large, should I have done something different in the order of the presentation? Did this slide work? And so immediately within 24 hours, I make those changes, because the next induction isn't going to be for another 4-6 months down the road. And you have to be fair to yourself. You're never going to remember all these details. So I think that immediate debrief is very important with documentation. And then just celebrating the success of the event. Thanking people for being there, thanking all of those people that helped, as Marie was talking about, any facilitator, moderator, your tech person, those people that helped promote it. Those things are very important, because it helps you wrap up with a real great, genuine feeling that you accomplished something that was meaningful.
I'd just like to add that last year, when we finished the PhD Virtual Connect, Peter Wolfenberg and Anna Felipe and Harman Hummel and myself, and we were just, quite euphoric, really, the fact that we'd survived. But I think the fact that it went so well that there were nobody wanted to go offline. And that was actually, the conference had finished and the attendees were still there and the presenters. And I think that's also, at times, we had a wee debrief, I think, with some of the presenters as well, not just the committee. And then eventually we had with the committee itself online debrief, but we did follow up afterwards with everybody, you know, that was on that virtual, just a small email asking, you know, did they have, you know, a good experience, and did they have any suggestions? Yeah, would we consider, you know, extending a virtual conference time, because obviously that's a very high. Do you do 3 hours? Do you do 4? Can you expect people, you know, to sit that long, or do you expect people to dovetail in and out, which might obviously, you know, be important if you're showing everybody on camera, that might, you know. So I have to admit that the prep work that you do beforehand is great, but I think you also have to do quite a lot of work afterwards as well. And some people maybe forget that, you know, that you know, when you have a committee like that, it's a couple of weeks afterwards as well that you're still actually working off your virtual event to some degree, because you want obviously people to come again next year, and you know, more people even. So I think that's very important. But again, obviously you have to keep the work in perspective. That's something I also have to say, because I have said prep work and obviously looking after when it's finished, but have to keep it into perspective and know your committee and know what they can serve and volunteer, and that's extremely important. You can only be as good as the people you have around you. Yeah, that's, I think, the bottom line, really.
Yes, and that essential piece of, I don't want to say delegation in terms of, you know, you're the leader and they're doing your work. It really is. It becomes a group effort. And when you've got multiple people involved taking their piece, you are the sum of the parts. And that makes a huge difference, because, again, you don't know if my technology at home is going to go down. And look at this beautiful event. You know, Erica's in Indiana, in the middle of North America. I'm on the East Coast, Marie's in Europe. And so here we are connecting, but we just don't know what's going to happen. So know that you've got your backup systems, and it is it definitely is a group effort, and you've done the best you can, and then know next time that you may make changes. The other thing are post-event evaluations or surveys. Get the opinion of the attendees. How did it go? And you know, you brought up one other great point, is the length of the event. It's not unlike a committee meeting. At some point, you become very productive, and then it drops off, right? If it's too long. So then if it's going to be a longer event, you allow people coming in and out, and if they do that, how do you minimize the disruption to the event? So again, so much of it depends on the program itself, the number of people that need to participate, and the most important thing is, what are you hoping to accomplish? Are your outcomes going to be achieved? Sometimes it might be better to do 2 smaller or shorter events one week and the next week, rather than trying to get it all in one evening or one afternoon. So it's just something that the committee needs to discuss, and then reevaluate afterwards and determine, do we want to do this the same way next time? Yeah, excellent point.
I just wanted to say one last thing, and then obviously we have our European Regional Conference at the end of May, and obviously due to COVID-19, we're having to go virtual. We have obviously the 3.5-day conference that we intended is now, I think, a 2-day conference, but I think we're starting at about 11 in the morning and finishing at 6 in the evening European time. But I have to admit that it does give me some intrepidation at the moment, because this is the first time we've done, and there's a lot of volunteers. You know, I think there's about 40 of us working away. So I must admit, I will definitely, with the group, with Lourdes Lomba and João Apostolo, we'll have a big evaluation, I'm sure, at the end as to, you know, how to you know, do programming virtually, because I think the main thing is it's a learning experience, you know, and this is a bit of a steep curve for us in Europe at the minute, but I'm sure when we get out the other side on the 30th of May, yeah, we'll have lessons learned, and we hope to share those for other regions, you know, that obviously we'll be considering, I think, maybe in the next semester to do their regional conferences virtually. So I say watch the space, really.
Yes, yes, and it's a journey. It absolutely is a journey, and many of you have been placed on this bus to take this journey when you hadn't bought a ticket in advance. It was like it happened, and there we were. We were all of a sudden going on this virtual journey. Some of us had been doing it before, but it still changed the whole dynamic and the landscape. So, and I think because we're all in this together, we feel the challenge, both those of you working academically, many people that work in healthcare settings that are in an office, in a leadership position and are not necessarily going in. Those of us, it's fascinating how it impacts every nurse at some level. So we're all on this journey together, and it's working. I think that's the thing that I love, is that even the novice, technologically proficient people, if you will, they're doing it, and it's working beautifully. And they'll know that next time it'll be a little different. And I would say that we will probably continue to use virtual platforms differently and in a more innovative way moving forward, even when we are able to go back to more ground-based activities, because we realize we're reaching a different demographic, and it allows us to continue the discussion afterwards that sometimes when everybody leaves the ground event, they don't have that opportunity. So there's some great advantages that we can continue to use.
We have some questions from the audience. Marie-Louise and Carol, Region 10 chapters have been embracing technology for their board meetings and virtual platforms for induction ceremonies. What best practices and Sigma resources would you suggest for chapters who are conducting a virtual induction ceremony?
Would you like me to start with that, Marie?
Please.
Well, because that's really where I've had most of my experience. I think having a very well-designed slide presentation, if you will, that guides the experience. The other thing that I've done is, and we've had many inductees, upwards to 200 on a given induction. And the first time around, I scrolled through the slide and didn't read the names because we were a little concerned about the time. And I realized that wasn't special to them. So we went to actually reading each name, and I have a slide for each their last name and the first letter, the alphabet based on the alphabet. The other thing is I've always tried to include those special, meaningful elements of Sigma that could get lost virtually. Not just the call to action, but why that meant something to me, or I give an example of how this changed somebody's professional and personal life. We always have a keynote, and try to bring a keynote that you think is going to attract your audience. So obviously, if you're inducting students more traditional students that are a little younger, bringing somebody in like Dr. Abel from Sigma to talk about, your personal brand, or which of course applies to everybody, but they might be more intrigued in how do I set up my LinkedIn or my Facebook, or what is it that you're really trying to connect with your members about at any given time. The other thing, as I mentioned a little earlier, is recognizing that little things happen and allowing an individual to feel special if there was a little mishap in terms of somebody's name being misspelled or omitted. The other thing that we've done is we've actually taken the inductees off mute, and they still all recite. Now you have to give it a little time because it's not going to be a normal cadence, so it'll sound like a little bit of off where nobody's in calibration. But that has been kind of fun too if it's a bit of a smaller group, because you're still hearing everybody's voices. And if it's a small enough induction group, you can have them come on camera in that moment. And there's this unbelievable feeling of we're all in this together. And now if you think that might not be possible, we've identified a few people who recite the pledge on behalf of all the inductees. And so we've tried to identify somebody, like there was a situation on an induction where somebody's name was omitted and her grandparents were online. I felt so badly. So what we did is, because induction really is a formal experience, we invited her back for the next induction to be the person that recited the pledge on behalf of the inductees. So she had this experience to individually be recognized, and her grandparents joined yet again, and it was really lovely.
In general, what cultural considerations should we be aware of?
Cultural, well, I think for us in Europe, when we're celebrating, that not every country celebrates in the same way. And I can think of at the moment with the COVID-19 pandemic that there are a number of countries that are very concerned, with their nurses in clinical practice and their patients. And therefore, I have noticed that on virtual presentations, we've had to respect, that they might not want to attend or able to attend. So we've made the recordings available. I think with International Nurses Day yesterday and obviously on Tuesday, which was the main celebration here in Europe, just to be respectful of certain chapters within certain countries that their attention, their priority is elsewhere, and give them that space. That's one other thing. And I think when on a virtual presentation you may be giving awards out, not every country is comfortable with giving awards out because they feel that everybody, is, a pioneer in nursing, is good in nursing. So I have noticed that with some of our conferences, that best oral posters and best oral communications, you have to be a little bit sensitive when you're presenting to recipients. I think it's obviously knowing your attendees and trying to find a middle road, really, to try and not overly, as I say, respect culture, because you have to be very sensitive to catch it, in the middle, so that people who do want to celebrate or who do want to engage, that they also are able to do it in their culturally appropriate. And some of our Russian countries' culture, yes. Again, as I say, it's knowing who you're dealing with and then respecting their space and their abilities to want to interact, and trying to work with them to see how best you can make them comfortable, when attending in a virtual sense. So it is, again, back to preparation. And I suppose I'm talking now as a regional coordinator more than as a past president. It's, obviously, trying to get to know your chapters and sound them out a little as to, how best can I serve you as a regional coordinator, and taking that on board when you're programming and, when you're asking people to, I've also noticed that a Sunday in Israel is a working day, but in the northern part of Europe, a Sunday isn't. So you have to just, be, what's the word, a bit savvy, really, in approaching these items.
And I really appreciated what you said about knowing your audience. And again, what are your outcomes? What are you hoping to accomplish? I think that, culturally, also being on camera may be an issue. When we're talking about language differences, some of the platforms are very able to do translation, or somebody may speak English, but it's a little less comfortable for them. So you want to adjust your timing so that they feel most comfortable. So I think there are ways that can be done, both in terms of dates, times, sensitivity to holidays and religious events. And again, just asking. And if you hear feedback, why did you schedule it on this day? We've got this event. I mean, unless it's been publicized, revisit that date and say, gosh, we weren't aware, we're so sorry. So I think that just working with your people, working with the people that will be attending, and knowing that they truly appreciate that ability to be recognized and appreciated for their needs.
When speaking at a conference, I'm very interactive with my audience. However, at a virtual event, what are some tips and tricks I could use to speak to an empty room with an online audience?
That's where I love camera. Now, again, it depends on the people. I love to look at facial cues. Just like an audience, you can see, am I losing the group here? Does somebody look like they have a question? So if it's a smaller committee, that's a little different. When it's larger, you just have to trust your instincts and know your ability to present. Know that your presentation was well designed. And when you open it up for questions afterwards, that's when you might be able to determine next time around what might I need to do differently. I see Marie nodding, so please go ahead. What would your thoughts be?
Well, I suppose that yes, we had in Europe a slight incident recently, and we did yesterday with a particular virtual presentation add some safeguarding issues. We had to, because of the time between the first event and the second event, we weren't really able to look at the packaging of our virtual platform. So we had to turn off, as we used a waiting room, turn off everybody's screens, muted everybody, locked the program down, and that made it very difficult, as you were saying, for our presenter. And we had Connie Sobon-Sensor from, she was previous Sigma UN liaison. Fabulous presentation from Connie, but Connie found it very difficult to talk to a black screen. Because obviously she had done her slides with the intention of a bit of interaction. And again, even if it wasn't interaction as in questions and answers throughout her presentation, she would have looked at the screen to see people, their faces, see how they were reacting, and she lost that, and she was saying that in her presentation. And I think that's important. The fact that she said that, throughout her presentation, she wondered how it was being received.
Yes.
But again, that's confidence, because Connie's presentation was just, she knocked it out of the ballpark there. It was really good. But so I'd say, if I know Harishita Patel, who's the president of the Swedish chapter, did do a bit of preparation with Connie the day before. And I think that was very important for Connie to know that her presentation was going to be, I think her worry was that I'm an American, maybe in Europe they look at it slightly different, I don't know. So we're able to have a chat beforehand as to say, yes, this will be fine, the audience, yes. And then afterwards there was a small evaluation just to help, obviously, Connie, by saying, it was really, really good, even though you found it difficult. So I think,
Yeah, I agree. And as a presenter, we may need to provide tips to less seasoned presenters, but even seasoned presenters who aren't used to this setting. And I do try to visualize people sitting in an audience and smiling with me. And I think that makes a difference, is just assume that they're enjoying it and embracing your material, and then look at the feedback afterwards. It'll work. It really will work. You just have to trust your instincts.
Well, thank you so much to our presenters today for all this great information. Sigma is grateful that you took the time to share with this audience, and we look forward to hearing from you in the future. As a reminder to our attendees, please submit the state or country you are from in the questions feature. We hope you enjoyed this webinar. Be sure to check out Sigma's upcoming webinars, podcasts, and resources to support you and your colleagues at sigmanursing.org. Also, previously recorded webinars and podcasts are freely available on the Sigma repository. Thank you so much for joining us, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.